The Quintessential Podcast is proud to announce that we have a new presenting sponsor, Axia Time. Axia Time is a really cool watch company focused on ultra custom watches to commemorate life's greatest accomplishments. Watches whose styling and quality match the significance of the accomplishments they represent. Axia Time is also partnered with all the leading lacrosse organizations to create all-American timepieces for high school boys and girls and college men and women. Axia Time even creates timepieces for elite awards like the Tewaaraton and Naismith. If you're interested in a high-quality, Swiss-made timepiece to commemorate a great accomplishment, you need to check out their designs at axiatime.com. That's AXIA time.com. If you're celebrating a team achievement like a state championship, national championship, or even world championship, you have to check out the timepieces they created for teams like Jesuit Dallas, the University of Maryland, and even the USA U21 World Champions. Quintessential Podcast, making our way through the month of January. Today we bring on Jerry Byrne, the head coach at Harvard. Coach Byrne, welcome to January. Just before we get started, what's the feeling like in the Ivy League? I had Mike Murphy on last week as you guys kind of sit with your captain's practices while others get to start things. How do you approach that?
Each team is different. I think there's a sense within the outside world that the league is kind of monolithic relative to everything, whether it's admissions or financial aid or when you can start. Your captain's practice stuff can start the week before classes start. And so, I think, depending on when that is for your team, obviously Dartmouth has a trimester system, so they start a little bit earlier. So no, it's that time of year where, hope springs eternal, and the guys are coming back early. They come back from their holidays, and, the energy is off the wall. As I always say, the challenge is, can you have that same energy on a rainy day in March? Because it's easy to have it when you're just about to start and your official practices haven't started yet, and you're reconnecting with friends who you haven't seen in 4 or 5 weeks. So let's monitor and maintain that energy on the great days and maybe on the struggle days as well.
That's a great point. Call me on the third week of practice in the middle of February when it's 28 and drizzly. Big picture question, and I got some questions here. This is not going to be our usual coach speak. What type of person would you like to see hired as the president of Harvard? Academia, business person, CEO, from politics, maybe a former educator. Like what type of person can fit that role?
Any school, whether you're a medium-sized state school or, a legacy university like Harvard, the hats that they have to wear is very much like the various hats that an athletic director has to wear. The athletic director 50 years ago, Gene Corrigan, for example, was a former athlete, an athletic director at, Division III, Division I, ran a conference, and then had to learn and develop the skills to negotiate TV contracts and sponsorships and things like that. So much like the evolution of the athletic director as a CEO, the evolution of the university president is always it's not going to evolve in the same way that the athletic director has, because the president of any university is always going to come from academia. That is the mission of any university, is to teach and educate, but that doesn't kind of minimize the fact that they have to also manage, a disparate demographic of students and professors and fundraising and architecture and growth. So yeah, I think there's a variety of skill sets that a university president has to balance, but it's always going to be focused on research and education.
You mentioned that variety of skill sets, and I think in college athletics right now, the environment has really changed to the point where coaches, administrators need a wider variety of skills, whether it's portal management, dealing with NIL, financial aid, roster management now in this post-COVID era. You brought up a fact, Jerry, just in a text we were having back and forth about how there's kind of an inequality right now in college sports that is more drastic than ever before. And you know, I spoke with NCAA President Baker at the Celebration Bowl about it, and it hit me when I was just doing a preview for next week. I'm writing about Duke, Virginia, and Notre Dame as the top three teams. Well, Duke and Notre Dame benefit dramatically from their postgraduate programs. Like we're competing, it feels like in an era where schools are really have uh, different ways that they can stack their roster, whether it's scholarships, financial aid, NIL, or through the portal. What do you see as the key ingredient there?
I think you have, like, wherever you are, you're going to look at these kind of seismic shifts in college athletics and in college lacrosse in particular through the prism of your own experience. Like within our league, and it varies within schools, but in general, there's not a lot of transfer opportunities within the Ivy League. The academic kind of, process that you take in your 4-year experience is very particular and it's very specific. So there's real kind of admissions challenges and curriculum challenges to transfer into our league. So I don't spend a lot of time kind of crying in my pillow thinking that I'm going to change, a philosophy that's, 120 years, 130 years in the making. So while accepting that, it puts more challenges on the coaches in our league to recruit well, skill, character, development opportunities, commitment to an academic journey and their life after Harvard, for example. So that is always going to be a challenge, but I think it's a particular challenge and opportunity within our league. So that's not going to change. And so relative to the teams that we recruit against, the ACC teams in particular, is and not in a negative recruiting way, but there's a factual part of how we may recruit that's saying, hey, our roster is going to be our roster. That, who we recruit are going to be the people that are going to be on their team. We're not going to have 3, 4, 5, 6, transfer people on the team. And this is not, I'm not maligning or besmirching the teams that can do that, because if I was still coaching in that league, you're 100% chance that I'd be trying to take advantage of it. But those are, on the surface, they're competitive advantages. The fact that you can, get a 5th year, or the fact that you can extend your academic journey for an extra year or two. And this is independent of the COVID effect. So people think, oh, once the COVID effect stops, this is going to stop. No, this is a certainty that's part of, how big a team is going to be, how many people are going to extend their academic journey 5 years, the increase in redshirting, the fact that non-Ivies can stack scholarship and financial aid, which you couldn't do in the past. So it gives teams really the ability to have like 15 to 20 scholarships. You add on the NIL benefit, at various schools that are kind of including your alma mater, is that, that's a way for them to, for Johns Hopkins to compete against an ACC or Big Ten school. So listen, every place has their advantages and disadvantages, and we hang our hats on the advantages and we try to minimize our disadvantages. So the advantages for Harvard and the Ivy League is they're older than every other school. That means that gives them generational wealth and leverage and access and networks that the other schools don't have. The fact that we can talk about our rosters aren't going to be stocked with transfers. Like, there's been 2 athletic transfers into Harvard in the last 12 years. One of them happened to be Chase Yeager, who played for me, but that's two in the last 11 years. And so, those give those places advantages, but I think what they have not realized yet, and maybe it doesn't come up, is what is the effect of having, what's the cultural effect of having, maybe delaying my opportunity to be on the field if I was a recruited athlete at a place and I keep on getting stepped over by, a 23, 24-year-old graduate player who's 3 years older than me and been in the weight room longer. So the jury's still the jury's out on the benefit. It's really beneficial to the teams that can do it. But is there a long-term effect? I think I'm hanging my hat on the certainty that the Ivy League will have the athletes that they have and the outcomes that they can have professionally as well.
I've seen it in college football where coaches have to constantly re-recruit their own roster on a yearly basis to maintain, or guys are going to hit the portal, as you said. If I get passed by a continual wave of transfers in, eventually I got to leave Dodge. Serious question. My parents are both teachers, let's say, on Long Island, public school teachers. An ACC school's offered me a full ride. How much financial aid would I qualify for at Harvard?
The league has really aggressive financial aid. It's never, it depends on your household income. And, I'm not going to profess to know what teachers make in New York. I don't think it's Strugglesville, but, they're not millionaires either.
My daughter,
Long Island's an expensive place to live,
My daughter's like, Dad, you grew up poor. I'm like, Grace, we were not poor. Both my parents were employed. Exactly. We had our summer. We were not poor.
Yeah, we went up to the Irish Alps, up to the Catskills. We went on vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
It varies by somebody that's really not kind of a fair example, because going to school for free is always going to be really hard to compete with. If you in our league, if you're making less than probably $150,000, all things being equal, you can compete with somebody who's getting a really aggressive
okay.
Financial aid. But the real challenge is, because there's not that many guys who are getting full scholarships. They might be getting really aggressive scholarships, financial aid stacked on top of it, NIL money on top of that. That's a really, that becomes the real challenge. But all things being equal, someone who's getting a 40% athletic scholarship, we're always going to be able to compete with that kind of player. Where the competition really comes is that we really hang our hat on outcomes, professional outcomes, where guys are going and starting their careers and lives, and the fact that we play in a preeminent league that's had a lot of success in the last 5 to 7 years, making Final Fours and winning national championships and having a lot of teams make the NCAA tournament. So, I think one of the narratives that our league has to do better and our coaches have to do better is, and you think about this relative to the SEC, is there's a lot of pride in playing in the SEC for football. You know this because you cover those sports. Like that brand has an identity of excellence in a variety of ways, and that Mississippi may hate Alabama and Alabama may compete every year with Georgia, but at the end of the day, they're all part of that league, and they want to kick their ass on Saturdays. But if they're not playing, they're rooting for the league. And I think one of the things that we have to do is kind of not just compete and combat against the narrative of Big Ten, ACC, but we compete with them, we combat them, we recruit against them, we win some, we lose some, but we're a peer, and I don't think anyone is a peer to ours in the outcome department. So we need to kind of marry and merge those things from a messaging standpoint as a collective group, not just independently.
I've got an artifact here. This is your board from the 2022 playoff game against Rutgers, the Springsteen and Goodfellas game that Anish and I brought. And I didn't see you guys really in person last year. I saw you on tape a couple times. So I'm seeing all these first year guys on this list now who are juniors, correct?
Yes.
Wow. So Owen Gaffney, Miles Bodkiss, Andrew Perry, Lucas Hilsenrath, Joe Dowling. These guys are all Andrew O'Berry, Thomas Martinson. All these guys are juniors now.
Yes.
That's a strong class. Why? Give me a reason why, and I think you can. Why can Harvard win the Ivy League this year?
I think before you answer that question, I think the more central question is, all right, you have this, kind of seminal resurrection year in 2022 after, two and a half years of, COVID and everything. So I think part of it was obviously getting released from the blocks and being like, oh my God, we're back together, we're practicing. It was a great story. We had really good wins. The league had a great year, and you make the NCAA tournament, and then and we end up, I think, Terry Foy and a lot of teams, we were ranked anywhere from 11th to 15th, and we have a disappointing year last year. So I think before I answer your question, is I think the bigger question is what, can you explain the struggle of last year? And I think a little bit of the struggle last year was, you don't get to start where you finish, which is one of, KC's lines, that team is gone. That team in that moment is gone. You had guys graduating. Yeah, we had, I think, 12 or 13 freshmen who played in that game, the NCAA tournament game. And, that team's gone and this team's new team. So whether it was, feeling like, all right, it's going to be this up and to the right trajectory. We had some injuries and we had some close games that we didn't win. And we had some really good wins over Cornell and some other really good teams. And we're up 9-3 on Michigan with like 5 minutes to go in the second quarter. And we end up giving up 5 goals in the last, 5 minutes of a quarter. And I think that was a real kind of turnaround. And so, you don't get to start where you're finished. And, last year had some really high moments and disappointing. So, do we have an opportunity to win this league? Absolutely. Do we have, injuries and some kind of reckoning that we have to make through based on what happened and what didn't happen last year? But no, I think we have, a really experienced group of players at every position and some really good freshmen. I think we're going to, again, play 4, 5, 6 freshmen this year, which is like, if I'm doing my job well, and I'm not inferring that I'm not doing it well, but if I'm doing it well, less and less freshmen are playing. It's just not happening as aggressively as I would have thought. And, but I think 4, 5, 6 freshmen are going to play a lot this year, which speaks to some injuries and some development challenges. But I agree. I think this team can, if we can get some consistency in some real specialty areas, I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be there at the end.
Sam King, Greg Campese, Colin Bergstrom. You mentioned freshmen, and again, I go back to there's an article next week, Lex All-Stars, Duke, Virginia, Notre Dame, just a preview. I mentioned one freshman of the 3 teams. There's one guy, McKay Millen of Virginia, is the only freshman that, so you're in a good spot, I guess, as a program when you're not relying on freshmen. Got some great email feedback from our fans. It's quint.kesnick@espn.com. Jacob, Peen, these guys sent me these incredible emails, these listeners. They want to know, there's a little feeling, many of them are coaching out in the boonies, out in the sticks. How do you format practice, and how far in advance are you in terms of your practice formats?
Historically, how far ahead you are, maybe a day or two, because you want to kind of, this is historically, you want to stay kind of nimble and mobile and open to, all right, what happened yesterday or in previous days that you can kind of manipulate and customize into the next day's practice. So that's kind of historically maybe a day or two. When we do our practice planning, we have our template for our, what we hand out to the coaches and what we share with the players. We share our practice plan with our players electronically earlier in the day with links to any sort of new drills or reminders of new drills. So you're trying, when you're in the Ivy League, you're trying to save minutes because we start later than everybody else and our game starts. So anything that you can do to facilitate reps and kind of efficiency with time. So we try to meet our players where they are using technology to save time, to educate them, to allow them to peer-to-peer teach each other. So when we get on the field, we can be really efficient. But so that historically, that's the way we've approached it. This year, Neil Hutchinson is my head assistant, and Nick Grill is our new defensive coach, and Mike Terranova, who coaches our goalies and faceoff guys. I've challenged them this year to, hey, let's do an overview of all the teams we're playing, so that if I got locked in an elevator with you, you could give me a 5-minute summary of each team that we're playing. So
kind of a look we need to do this.
Look
something.
ahead. So we're looking at our whole schedule and
Yeah.
then distilling out, here's the 3 to 5 things we need to know about team XYZ. And then let's shake all of that out. And are there some consistent themes about the way they ride?
10-man.
Right. Yeah. The way they clear. This is a 10-man team. This is some of the things they do in the face-off. They have some set plays off of the end line or out of timeouts. Let's shake out some stuff and let's organize those and let's see if we can integrate them into practice in our kind of preseason, which goes from, let's say, third week of January to third week of February. And let's see if, not attaching it to a specific team, but integrating into practice. So if we have this general knowledge, when we get to that team, it'll be, we'll be that much further along. So that's been a little bit different, like looking at, basically it's the equivalent of a teacher looking at the textbook and pulling the 3 to 5 things out of every chapter, spending a couple of weeks teaching on that, and then kind of working your way through the chapter. So,
and on a game, it differs on a game week though. You're going to map out the week probably on Sunday or Monday morning with your staff. Staff.
And you want to develop a consistency of how you do it, so that the guys know the rhythm and the pacing of a week.
And that's okay. And then occasionally throw them a changeup.
Yes.
Have you run the stadium stairs at Harvard recently?
Not recently. Look, Coach Burns has played a little too much pickleball and squash in the last couple of years because squash is a very fancy sport, and it's kind of like it's kind of like the Nassau County handball, and so it's so a little too much of that with the wrong shoes. So my feet aren't exactly what had me ready to do the stadium stairs, but I've done the stadium stairs before.
PLL coming back to Boston this summer. So if I'm up there, I will run those stairs. They're brutal because they're separated. They're far apart and steep.
Well, when you come back, I got a couple of food places for the TV crew. I live in the North End, which is the culinary capital of Boston, and so I can help you guys navigate that.
Limoncello. Joe Beninati and I were out. I forget what year it was, 06, 07, MLL final in Boston. We're out at a North End restaurant and we're eating, and all of a sudden we see David Morrow and Jake, Body by Jake, eating dinner with their families. Their families go, they see us, they call us over. We're there, I don't know, well past midnight. It was Joe needed like a death scene restoration on his hotel room before the championship game the next day. It was one of the all-time great.
I live about I live about 75 yards from Limoncello, so it's that's it's just a tremendous area. No, we're super excited that the PLL is coming to Harvard Stadium, and the Cannons were hugely supported when they play there. I'm an OG Cannon. I played the first 2 years up in Lowell, so it's great that they're coming to Harvard. The community, lacrosse community in Boston is super engaged, and I think it's been reflected in how people come out to support our team as well.
Up in Lowell, I remember the bartender at the hotel, Rocco. It was a single man operation, and there was like 900 people there after a game.
Right. Exactly.
Hey, you've done a nice job attendance wise. At certain, like, it feels like you're targeting 2 or 3 home games and making it an event. How have you done that, and why have you done that?
I think, I'm not sure who said this, but let's call it Tip O'Neill or one of the Kennedys, that all politics is local. And so all, growth and engagement and relationship building is local. So one of the first things we did when we became the coaches at Harvard is, we have to connect with, the people who are going to come and want to see really high-end top 20 lacrosse. So whether it's, the relationship with the, MYL, Kevin Barney, or Town Pride League, or we went out of our way with clinics and engagement, and we do open practices, and, we do a lot of work with Team Impact, which is a Quincy-based organization, and Harvard Lacrosse of Boston. And so we we just got out there and said, come anytime, come to practice, coaches clinics, free stuff constantly. So, with if all politics is local, all crowds are local as well. And so we've just made it a great event, but it's also, they have a bar at Harvard's games, the Crimson Pub.
Yeah.
So that's one end of Jordan Field is the Crimson Pub. And the other end of Jordan Field is the Crimson Club, which is where the students and the alumni hang out. They're playing beer pong and getting loose at that end of the field. So we got the Crimson Club and the Crimson Pub. And so, and I think the last piece is our guys are really good, citizens of the community of Harvard, and they do really well in school. They're good people. And, we've won really big games, Cornell and Princeton, top 5 wins. So you have good wins. You've got natural rivalries within the league. Harvard has 42 sports. So people think the Ivy League's not into athletics. There's no team in Division I that has more sports than Harvard. So this is an engaged athletic community, and they love to watch competition. So I think all of those things kind of blend together to create a great crowd.
Special those events, they become, I remember watching film of your, I think it was Princeton game 2 years ago, and the place was bonkers.
Yeah.
Do you think coaches should be compensated for attendance? Because I see, like this week, there's that chart released. Team budgets, 2-3 million. Team attendance, less than 1,000. Coach is getting paid for his camp. Coach is getting paid for his events. Coach is not getting paid to fill the stands. College football is a little different. Empty seats get you fired in college football because it's revenue. Do you think coaches, if you would renegotiate your contract, would you want some compensation for extra attendance?
Well, if I could go back in the Wayback Machine, I definitely would, because I know we've made some, we averaged almost 3,000 fans for our Ivy League games. People get, I think the fan these days is much more driven by who are you playing?
Yeah.
And on some level, how well are you doing, obviously, but who you're playing becomes really important. So that's why you see these kind of fluctuations. Like we averaged maybe 1,800 total fans, but almost 3,000 fans for our Ivy League games. So, some of that as far but in hindsight, yeah, if I was getting a little kickback for that, I'd be doing pretty well right now.
If I'm an athletic director, that's what I do, because I see coaches promoting their own camps during the season on game day, instead of promoting, hey, come on down to our game today. It's also on ESPN Plus. Check us out. Like, they're not getting paid for people to come to watch them play, but they're getting paid handsomely to attend my summer camp.
No, I listen. I think it's, when I was coaching at Notre Dame, when you're in Indiana, I saw it as a huge part of my created job responsibility was to tell the story of the program, what's going on, what successes are you having, what are your players doing, what internships are they getting, what trips are they taking, all of that stuff. That part of the storytelling, I think I saw as part of my job, because I knew it was really beneficial in recruiting. It was really beneficial in helping to educate high school and travel team coaches about what was unique about our program. I've continued to do that at Harvard because it's super competitive for students. It's super competitive for internships. It's super competitive for the entertainment dollar when you're in a city like Boston. And so I see it as a huge part of my responsibility to tell the story of Harvard lacrosse. And if we do that well, then attendance will grow, engagement will grow. Our players will be seen as these multi-dimensional people, not just people who cradle on Tuesdays and Saturdays. And so I'm going to do it whether I get, compensated or not, because I think part of my job is to pull back the curtain on a place like Harvard to educate people on its, the diversity of experience and people and backgrounds and all the variety of things that our guys do. So I take that job as serious as I take my ability to coach defense and recruit and mentor my guys.
Do we lift too much? We should be spending more time on our speed development. I know it's hard, like to go from a 4.6 to a 4.55 takes a ton of work. And you can teach a freshman how to bench press. You can improve his bench press from 170 to 275 in like a year's work. And there's easy results there. But does strength matter? Because I go to these PLL games and it's a speed game. The good guys are incredible with the stick. I'm not sure we're playing enough with our stick and speed. Like there's no guys who are there jacked. Like,
Yeah, listen,
but you
I
guys,
can't.
but college coaches love it, Jerry, because it's a form of daycare, it's daycare, it's team building, and the results are wow. If I work, I actually get stronger. But it doesn't correlate to anything.
Yeah, that's a. I'm going to rant a little bit on. Listen, when we got to Harvard and we had so many young guys playing, one of the things I would tell my assistants would be like, no one cares how much you can lift. You don't know how to play. Like I had to make a choice based on the challenges that we faced with timing and our scheduling within the league that like we need to learn how to play. If you squat and bench X, but don't know how to clear and you can't run, who cares if it makes a really good Instagram video of a guy,
Yeah.
deadlifting 600 pounds. And so, last year, as our IQ had gotten to the point where we had a year of post COVID where we were practicing and lifting, we started to make this transition of finding a balance between practicing and lifting. And I'm going to maintain that because you need to find this explosiveness.
Yes.
I don't spend a lot. We don't spend a lot of time maxing, and because I think that's as much ego and leads to much more hamstring and back injuries. Like the hamstring and back injuries in our sport is epidemic, and I think that part of that is lifting and maxing and fixating on that, but it's also shooting too much, not warming up and cooling down properly. We spend a lot of time on kind of functional movement, shoulder, hip, groin to minimize that while still being able to get enough lifts and everything in.
I had a Florida State running back a couple years ago who had a hamstring injury, and I knew I'd be talking about it. So I did some research with some doctors, and I came to the conclusion that a lot of the lacrosse hamstring injuries are because we run with our heads up. And the second you're carrying the ball and you lift your shoulders and your head up to see, like we're taught to do, run with your eyes up, that puts more pressure on the hamstring instead of running with a body lean. When you run with a body lean, you don't tear your hamstrings as much as when you stand up and run straight up.
Yeah. Again, there's, my daughter is going to go into residency for sports medicine and had a lot of injuries as a college athlete. There's like nonstop research going on this stuff, but like one of the consistent themes that I kind of extrapolated over the last couple of years is tight hips, labrums.
Yes.
Tight hips, core imbalance, like not crunches, but rotational strength on both sides of your body is really important for lacrosse. It's passing, it's shooting, it's checking, it's all of those things. Guys are doing way too many crunches, not enough rotational strength. So you get this imbalance with your hips and this imbalance with your core, which starts this domino effect that leads to back and hamstring stuff. So we do a lot of kind of yoga type movements in our pre-practice to open up hips and shoulders to kind of minimize that. And it's had a demonstrable effect on the number of guys that we've had in the training room for hammy and back stuff.
You mentioned that. I'll finish up with, north, south, even at my advanced age, I feel fine. It's anytime that I have to go sideways or rotate, it's pretty bad. There's a great Bikram studio up there in Boston. What's that famous square with the church?
Well, there's a lot of churches and squares in Harvard. There's Harvard Square, and Porter Square, and Davis Square, and North Square in the North
one
End,
by the hotel where I would have stayed at for the NCAA's. Could look it up here.
I don't know.
The famous square, but anyway, they got a great Bikram studio there, and there's a Bikram studio in the Chinatown area.
Cool. I try. I don't like. I don't have the mindset for yoga. I make them call it stretching because I don't have a couple of candles and some yoga pants on. That's not really for me. I need a little more competition.
Yeah, go to a Bikram class. You won't be begging for candles. All right, Jerry. we'll let you get back on your way. Appreciate your time in January. Good luck in your preseason, and then in your February slate. Hopefully, maybe I'll see you this year.
Yeah, let's hope, and if not, we'll see you at when you come up in for the PLL game.
That's it for this week's episode of the Quintessential Podcast. Thank you to our guests. Thanks to our technical director, Dr. Nick Z. I want to thank you for listening. And of course, thanks to our sponsor, Axia Time. A watch, what a better gift than a ring. I've got a championship ring. It's collecting dust in a box. I wear watches all the time. Thank you, Axia Time. It's axiatime.com, and we'll see you next week.